Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good!
Oh, yeah? Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard. Welcome in to another new episode of The Lager Line, as always served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Carback Brewing. I'm your host, Ben Dubose, editor of USA Today's Rockets Wire and contributor to Sports Talk 790, flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets, and a contributor to this program. As always, I'm joined by our co-host and producer, Paulo Alves out of Portugal. Paulo, how enjoyable is the World Cup when you don't have to worry going into that final group stage game about your team actually making it to the knockout round?
Listen, it's good, don't get me wrong, and even though Portugal the last couple of times have been like, they're not the ultimate underdog as they used to be for stretches of their history, especially, the 2010s. We are known for choking in the group stages. We are known for, playing for the draw and losing and stuff like that. We're known for suffering until the last second. It's a very Portuguese thing in soccer. So it's good to know that we are already qualified, but it's also important to note that first and second is a big difference because it's basically versing Brazil, which is one of the favorites, or versing Switzerland or Serbia. So it's still important to, at the very least, get a draw against South Korea.
Yeah. There's still some bitterness, by the way, on the U.S. side because of 2014 and the game that Portugal drew against the U.S. in the final seconds because, wow, until this year, that was the last time the U.S. had a legitimate World Cup team. It's
if you ask just a normal Portuguese person about the one player they'll remember from the U.S., diehards might mention Tim Howard or Christian Pulisic now, but the casuals will remember Clint Dempsey, and he'll forever be engraved in our memories because of that.
I can imagine. Yeah, I just had to throw that in there because when you mentioned the 2010s being a down period, that might be accurate, but they still inflicted a lot of heartbreak on the U.S. based on that one game in the summer of 2014. Anyway, you mentioned ultimate underdogs, and that's what the Houston Rockets are going to be this weekend, Friday and Saturday night, a back-to-back against the Suns and the defending NBA champion Golden State Warriors. Phoenix, of course, on the front end has the best record in the Western Conference right now. They don't have Chris Paul, but who really needs him when you have Devin Booker averaging nearly 50 points a game in their last two? They've won 6 in a row overall. It's going to be really tough for the Rockets to get a win. They're 5-16 on the year, which matches where they were this time a year ago, although when they were 5-16 a year ago, it felt a bit better because, number one, they were in the middle of that 7-game winning streak, and number two, Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun were rookies. Kevin Porter Jr. was in his first year as the full-time point guard. Stephen Silas was in his first year with most of this current group, so it was easier to excuse some of the shortcomings and to say, hey, this is intentionally a bit vanilla. These guys are very green. Whereas now it's a bit more frustrating. They did win the 2 games over the weekend, last weekend that is, against Atlanta and Oklahoma City at home. But these 2 games at Denver this week, they lost by an average of 18 points per game, and it felt less competitive than that. Gave up nearly 125 points per game. Just very uncompetitive. It hasn't been fun to watch. And the Rockets are largely healthy other than Jae'Sean Tate, who's missed most of the season with the ankle injury. So it's pretty frustrating, and at 21 games in, 5-16, matching their record from a year ago, on pace to win about 20 games, give or take yet again. We're now just past the quarter point of the 2022 to 2023 NBA season. So it's a good point to sort of evaluate where the Rockets are. And for this discussion, it's probably better that we do it after these losses against the Nuggets, because if we had had this discussion a few days ago, it might have been more positive based on what we saw against the Hawks and the Thunder. But I think these 2 games against the Nuggets, the start of this brutal 4-game road trip, it's a dose of reality. Granted, the Nuggets are a much better team than the Rockets, but they really hit home some of the themes that we've seen from this first quarter of the season and why it's been so frustrating to watch, even if some of the individual players like Jalen Green, like Alperen Sengun, have clearly shown flashes from time to time. And to really get at the heart of the matter, I want to read you a 5-tweet thread from Matt Moore, HP Basketball on Twitter. We had him on this show, The Logger Line, a few episodes ago, and he's one of, in my opinion, we bicker from time to time, but I really think Matt is one of the sharpest national minds in the games. He really watches on an astute level, and of course, he's based in Denver, so these two Rockets-Nuggets games, he had a very close seat in the arena to watch what's going on and not going on the court. And these were his takeaways. And of course, he's saying it, from the perspective of these two games, but it's really about the season as a whole and where the Rockets are in their rebuild. Here we go. I'm going to read you these, and Paulo, you can just respond however you see fit. Seeing Houston up and close and personal this week, my big takeaway is that they have many talented players and zero dedication or discipline in doing the things that will help them win or get better. It's not effort. They're just so unfocused with the effort they give. Şengün's best talent is his versatility, and Jalen looked him off in the pinch post like 8 times last night. That's Wednesday. So instead, Şengün is trying to just score, and he did it well. But there's so much more he can unlock for Jalen and the others, and they just don't. Jalen Green still has a ton of possessions where he just not only gives up on what they're supposed to be running, but just elects to fire. Same with Kevin Porter Jr. When Jalen's shot quality is good, he's tremendous. That stuff will absolutely come with time. He's still so explosive. No team in the league needs someone to bring the ball up and yell at guys to get where they need to go as much as Houston. No team needs someone to hold them accountable as much. And it's fine. You can spend this time just developing skills, but the rot of losing is evident. I continue to love Jabari. I think Jabari Smith is about the right things. I watch him, and there are very few things where he's not doing the things he should. Paulo, your immediate reaction to that?
My immediate reaction is I agree for the most part, and it's good. It's good to see someone that doesn't watch this and that doesn't go through the highs and lows of watching every single NBA game, because I know, and it's starting to become a trend on Twitter where people say, "Hey, like we can't overreact to every single game." It's good to see that. Hey, these guys. We had Mark Hidler a couple of weeks ago. He had some of the same takes. Now Matt Moore has some of the same takes. It's a talented team. They're just completely out of sorts. And it's not, and like he says, it's not like they don't play with effort. They do, with some exceptions, but they, for the majority of the time, they do. It's just they're not, channeling those efforts into what needs to be done. And that's why, and it ties a little bit into Stephen Silas. That's why people are once again starting to call for Silas's job, because it's been 2 years and now a quarter, and it's been largely the same thing. No matter what the talent is, it's largely the same thing. It's a lack of structure. There were effort issues last season, but even the guys that were, making those efforts, they stood out so much because nobody else was doing so. And so it comes a point where, if it is true, and I believe that it is, I mean, it's so widely reported that they're trying to make a leap next season, that they're trying, even if you don't make the play and don't be one of the worst, 3 teams in the league, just make a leap into, hey, we were contending for the play-in, right? We make the free agent acquisitions. They have all the cap space. They have all the draft capital. If that's the case, what's going on right now, this shouldn't be just I think Matt touches it on just spending this time developing skills. That's not going to be enough, because if you don't have a system now and you're just kind of using games as practices where you're giving guys reps doing different things, right? You're giving Şengün a bunch of post-up reps so he can do it against NBA competition, but it doesn't really tie into a game plan, right? If that's what you're doing, then you're going to be behind schedule next season, and that might not be the worst thing in the world, but it just doesn't tie into kind of the timetable that we had set for ourselves, or what the Rockets set for themselves. And so that's why it kind of starts making sense. Well, if you really are trying to be better next season, first of all, I believe Stephen Silas could be a good head coach if the talent's already established, and he just has to manage the personalities, and the players already have a baseline of understanding of how to play basketball, and you're just, moving the chess pieces. This team is far, far away from that. And not only is it far, far away from that, you need someone in that will get them to that point. And I'm from what we've seen so far, I don't think Stephen Silas is that guy. And the next stage from what we are now also isn't that stage. Before we get to that stage, there will be middle stages where you're putting them in positions to succeed and they'll still make mistakes. But you've got a strategy going into games. You adapt somewhat to the team you're facing. That we're awful at that. I don't know how much of it is just not caring about the result as much, but we're awful at calling timeouts, and that was something that was pointed out after the Nuggets game extensively. And so, if you're trying to be good next season, it might be better to get a head start and if the coach you envision for this team is out there, then have him come in and start implementing a system so you can hit the ground running next year. And if that's not,
and I thought the rod of losing quote really got to the heart of that. That's something that you're going to have to start to shake this year if you want to make that progress a year from now.
Exactly, and let's say maybe that's not the case. Maybe they think they're not close enough, and they'll delay the cap space for 2024, which is an option.
Or make a push for Victor and Scoot.
Yeah, that's an option. It won't be great to give the Thunder a good pick unless we get incredibly lucky again, but that's an option. If that's the option, even as just a plain development head coach, I'm not convinced by Silas. I'm not convinced by what we've talked about, the philosophy, the meritocracy stuff. And one thing, and so I won't recycle all those points again, but one thing that Matt brings up here when he says Sengun's best talent is his versatility, and Jalen looked him off in the pinch post like 8 times last night. So instead, highlight this, Sengun is trying to just score. And this is when it becomes hurtful to keep Stephen Silas around. Because
and by the
all
way,
of a
Nikola
sudden,
Jokic, after game 1, went out of his way to point out the Rockets should be running more through Sengun. I think that sort of ties into it too.
Yeah. And most importantly to me, these guys are now changing their mentality towards the game to fit the deficiencies that come from the system and from the head coach. Last season, coming out of Turkey, Sengun was a really good passer. He still is, but he was actively looking to pass. It feels like this season he's actively looking to score because he's not sure if he doesn't try to score, when's the next time he's going to score. And you can see the exact same thing about with Jabari Smith. He's not being used at all. And you can say that he's not ready to be used, but you gotta give your number 3 pick some reps. And how many times have we seen this season Jabari Smith just, he doesn't get the ball for an entire quarter, and so he just grabs a rebound, dribbles up the floor, and pulls up for 3 because, hey, I don't know if I'm gonna get any more shots this game, so let me just try to get involved somehow. Or how many times does he get a kick out pass, is contested, pump fakes, right? Sees that the shot isn't there, and then reminds himself, oh, but I might as well shoot this because I don't know when I'm going to get the ball again. And he shoots a contested 3. That sometimes goes down. He's a good shooter. He hasn't shown it as much so far, but he's a good shooter. That's a shot that will be there for him. He'll be someone who's able to just rise above contest and shoot. But now we're creating bad habits. Now we're changing how these guys approach the game because the system is flawed. And because the system isn't looking, or the system right now is very much heliocentric. And whether the heliocentric guy is Jalen Green or Kevin Porter Jr. or even Eric Gordon in that famed unit that I call the death lineup, it really feels like once again he's trying to find a Luka in a team that has way too many options to be as heliocentric as the Luka team is, right? And so you should an ideal head coach can still make an offense work without a true point guard. There's many teams like the Boston Celtics for some seasons haven't had the point guard, and they've had better shot creators, but they don't have Jason Tatum bring the ball up the floor, ISO, or have a screen and play drive and kick all game. Right? There's ways to get guys in advantageous positions without needing a primary playmaker or this true point guard, because the truth is there's very few of those around the league anymore. And so, to conclude my point, regardless of if you're doing it for preparation of next season with a new head coach, or if you're doing it because you want to develop these guys better, and even if you're punting on next season, I'm not sure I don't think Stephen Silas is the answer. And the last thing I'll touch on is, even if you bring in a better head coach, call it, I think what for me is the best case scenario. Call it Quinn Snyder.
Mm-hmm.
Quinn Snyder is not going to get this team winning games this season, especially coming in halfway. So it's not like getting a new coach is going to take you out of the Wemby sweepstakes. I don't think there's anything in the world now that could get you out of the Wemby sweepstakes.
And honestly, you're probably not going to bring in a Quinn Snyder type coach, even if that's an option, even if you are willing to pay midway through the season anyway. The more likely scenario, you'd have an interim, and then, your big hire wouldn't be until the offseason anyway.
And you point out this, I think, on an earlier part. They've got the guys to bridge that gap in Hollins, and even Abdel Fattah. And these are all guys that strike you as the bad cop type of head coaches. And so they would, at the very least, I would say, prevent some of these bad habits from developing. And I think that's the most important thing. You don't want the coach to come in next season and have to first undo what Silas has done and then start doing what he wants to do. Mm-hmm. Right? You're setting yourself back even more.
The theme I keep coming back to, and we've said this in earlier pods, but the result is less than the sum of the parts. That's what it feels like. Because earlier this week, when I do my weekly pod with Jackson Gatlin on Locked On Rockets, we did player grades because we were effectively at the quarter point then as well. Now, perhaps we were in a better state of mind because we taped that on Sunday, coming off the wins against the Hawks and the Thunder over the weekend. But when you look at the marquee rotation players, the consistent guys, like we didn't do Garrison Matthews and Josh Christopher or Bruno Fernando. They just haven't played enough minutes. So the guys that have largely been out there all year. The only guys that I graded lower, I would say a C or lower, were Eric Gordon and Daishen Nix. Now, I even gave Kevin Porter Jr. a B-, which some people thought was being too nice. In my opinion, I grade him on somewhat of a curve because especially in the current contract he's on, I don't think he has to be a point guard to fit long term. And I should point out, when I do these grades, it's all relative to where they fit in the rebuild. What are realistic expectations? What are you trying to do with these guys long term? It's not, how good is this player? Because quite frankly, we know that. You can look up numbers and have a good idea of that. It's more, okay, where do they fit in the blueprint? And individually, other than maybe Nix and Gordon, but Gordon's basically aged out of the rebuild anyway, I think everyone is at, a tolerable or more than tolerable level. So it's not as if there aren't bright spots. Guys individually are showing flashes. They are getting better. And whether you want to attribute that to Silas or not, for the organization, it's a good thing. That's not to say that it's all perfect. I've got pretty much all of Turkey livid at me because I gave Şengün a B-, citing some of his defensive issues. You would have thought I gave him an F based on the YouTube comments section. But, in the grand scheme, I think it's been an encouraging year for a lot of these guys individually. I think, I understand the arguments that they may be developing simply because they're talented and 20 years old. I think the way you phrased it in a prior pod was sort of developing in spite of Silas rather than because of him, right?
Yeah, and I stick to that, I think.
Okay, that's fair. But I just do think we should acknowledge that, these guys, if you want to look at it as a developmental year, then some of these guys are getting better. They are showing flashes. That's the good news. I don't 100% believe that you should assign that to Stephen Silas just because, but in fairness to him, we should acknowledge that. And, that's part of the process. But there is another part too, in terms of actually getting the results to be closer to these individual bright spots. And that's where, be it the coach, the point guard, something is clearly missing. And I was struck by another one of Matt's tweets, to go back to the original thread. No team in the league needs someone to bring the ball up and yell at guys to get where they need to go as much as Houston. No team needs someone to hold them accountable as much. And it's fine. You can spend this time just developing skills, but the rot of losing is evident. Now, maybe it's not all point guard. Maybe some of those needs are because they're not getting that accountability from the coaching staff. I don't know. I'm not in the locker room, but you can certainly make that argument. I understand that. But the point guard debate, and that's where so much on Rockets Twitter, it seems like every game there's this constant referendum of, is Kevin Porter Jr. a point guard? And if he's not, then that must be the reason for all of this. And I don't want to go too much into the KPJ discourse. We've talked about that before. Again, for me, as long as the catch and shoot numbers are there and he's at least making an effort on defense, which he's not always, I do think the last couple of weeks it's at least trended in a positive direction, then there's something, especially on a very team-friendly contract, that you can make of a guy who can create his own shot at 6'6" and is a really good catch and shoot off-ball player, even if he's not the guy that you want as sort of the heliocentric option leading your offense. There's a way you can fit him in, and so that's why I don't, judge him too harshly. But again, time will tell on that, and me being somewhat soft on him is in part due to the contract, which, kudos to Rafael Stone for getting a very team-friendly deal. Again, if you want more KPJ discourse, you can check out our archives. I really don't think too much has changed on that front. But what I do find interesting in the context of Matt's tweet is the fact that there is no alternative at point guard other than KPJ. And who knows, maybe you don't have to have, maybe the alternative is not having a point guard at all, as you were saying, using the Celtics as an example. There's many ways you can approach it. But I think it's very interesting after a year in 2021 to 2022, last season, where the first half of the year you had DJ Augustine as your veteran point guard, a guy who was very steady, you could trust to make the right reads. He was generally beloved in the locker room. He was a good shooter as well. After the deadline, you got Dennis Schroeder, another veteran. He didn't shoot as well in Houston, but he is a good shooter. That's just small sample randomness. And a guy who, again, you could sort of trust to run an offense. And it wasn't just the 15 to 20 minutes per game that those guys played. It was the fact that they offered sort of a different take than KPJ. You could also scale them up if it was a game that KPJ wasn't playing that well. You could even let KPJ play off the ball some and perhaps scale up their minutes closer to 25. It just gave you options. And we know a year ago, besides having Augustine and Schroeder, they tried to get John Wall to play on a lesser role, about 20 minutes per game off the bench. Wall just was not willing to accept that. So at least a year ago, they saw this as a clear priority, and they had multiple guys in for that very specific purpose. Whereas this season, it feels like just going back to the offseason, it has not been a priority in roster construction at all. Daishen Nix is the backup point guard, and in my opinion, he has not been good. I just don't think that he gives you the type of penetration, rim pressure. He doesn't finish well. I looked the other day, his shooting percentage inside the arc this year was below 20%. I'm not sure if that's changed based on the Denver games, but just brutally low. He doesn't have the explosion or the touch on his drives to really finish at the rim. Hasn't shot free throws over his career all that well. And so it's tough to really have a traditional point guard in that drive and kick mold if guys aren't afraid. And he doesn't have a very athletic first step either when that player is trying to drive to the bucket and suck in the defense. And his three-point shooting has been a bit better than expected, but certainly not, a marksman in terms of a guy who can shoot 40% at high volume. He's not that type of guy. So again, I just think the balance for Daishen Nix is not very good. And, you've pointed this out on Twitter a few times. His lack of hustle at times is just staggering, be it going for loose balls defensively. Just for a guy who's on a non-guaranteed contract in his second year, basically has to prove it every single season. He doesn't seem to bring the intensity. And again, there's a reason why he was one of the only guys I graded as, a C or worse in the rotation. I think he's been really disappointing, and it shouldn't be shocking because, again, he was undrafted. He has no previous body of work. No one should be that surprised that Daishen Nix isn't very good. There's a reason why the Rockets got him at such a low asset cost and on such a ridiculously team-friendly deal. He was very unproven. This can happen when you have unproven players, especially ones who go undrafted. It's not unforeseeable. I suppose you could bring up Ty Washington, who is playing very well for the Vipers in the G League right now. But again, he was nearly a second-round draft pick, and he's a rookie. It's not like you can really expect him to make that much of a difference as a rookie. So it's just very interesting to me that, there are these viable complaints about not really having a point guard, a guy who can bring the ball up the floor, tell guys to get to the right spots. A year ago, they saw that as a clear priority. This year, with the same starter at the position in Kevin Porter Jr., they don't. And it's just very odd to me. And I feel like it's been oversimplified on Twitter. There's really a growing narrative that the Rockets just believe way too much in Kevin Porter Jr. We see this starting to take hold. And I don't really think that's true, because we just had the ultimate test for Rafael Stone in the front office for how much they believe in Kevin Porter Jr. with his contract negotiations. And I think the pretty clear answer was not that much. Agents around the league were stunned at how team friendly the deal was and just how little of his deal was actually guaranteed and how much of it is basically a constant prove it from year to year. That's not just Houston reporting. That was national. That was put out there. Agents were very surprised by that. So if the Rockets really believed in Kevin Porter Jr., it would not have been a big stretch for them to give him much more guaranteed money. No, they drove a hard bargain because they have the same questions that many of us do, be it on the court, off, or both. So I don't think it's so much that the Rockets, just have an overinflated view of who Kevin Porter Jr. is. I just think that for whatever reason, and maybe it's, the ultimate tanking move to position themselves for Victor or Scoot, there's a million explanations you can go with, but it just seems like that they don't really prioritize having a true point guard. And it's just interesting because I'm not saying that to get Stephen Silas off the hook. As you mentioned earlier, there's ways you can run an offense without a traditional point guard. But it's just interesting to me how different they seem to be approaching it relative to a year ago. Where are you at on that? Does that surprise you in any way?
Yeah, so I have a few things here. I think you made a couple of interesting points, and we usually don't disagree a lot. So I think this will be fun. I think to reinforce your point about the KPJ contract, the vibe that it very much came off as is this was a last day type of deal, which, in considering how favorable the deal was for the Rockets, it kind of makes you think, hey, the Rockets probably left this, this was the highest they were willing to go, and so they left this deal on the table kind of as a prayer. And I was like, hey, KPJ, listen, if you want to go right now, this is the best we can give you, and this deal is on the table until the end of the extension deadline. If you want to take it, you take it. And it felt like KPJ took it. And so I think that the timing of it kind of reinforces the fact that, hey, this was as high as they were willing to go. It wasn't a let's shoot for the fences and maybe he unexpectedly accepts, because that would have happened way earlier in the negotiation process. The fact that it took to the last day felt like, okay, KPJ caved. And so I think that reinforces your point about Russ. I do think they love him. I don't think it's as big of a deal as people make it out to be. And then about the about the roster construction thing, here's why I disagree. I don't think it was a priority last year. I think that the pieces that they had that were a lot of point guards fell into their lap via trades as salary filler. Okay. John Wall was one of them. Dennis Schroeder was one of them. DJ Augustine was one of them as well.
I guess. So, I mean, it would be quite a coincidence, but it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. The reason why I think they fell into their lap is because they were largely just like, okay, if this is a rebuild, right? You kind of make do with what you have, and you go out, and they went out and signed one of the holes they thought they had in Daniel Theis as a backup center. And okay, that's one thing they targeted. And then besides that, I think they were largely just trying to get the most out of the roster spots, the most out of around the edges, and they happened to have 2 point guards that came into trades, and I was like, okay, that's set.
The only counter to that I would throw is that a lot of people around the league expected them to buy out Schroeder at the deadline and perhaps make Daishen Nix, who was playing well with the Vipers at the time, their backup point guards, and they were clearly in tank mode second half of the season. And maybe it's just the fact that Nix is a second-year player now and he was a rookie then. But I do think that it's interesting that despite having every possibility in the world to buy out Schroeder and an expectation from many that they would after that trade, for some reason they didn't. To me, that was very odd, although you can sort of push back on that by pointing out that Schroeder was shut down for the last 7 games of the year. So I don't know. There's a lot of ways you can go.
No, that's a good point. But I would say that even with that, right, Schroeder fell into their lap as salary filler, and they were like, oh, okay, we have him, let's roll with him. Rather than, I don't think it was intentional to get Schroeder in that deal. It's largely because, hey, let's get rid of Daniel Theis. This isn't working. Let's get rid of him before this contract becomes potentially a hard contract to trade. And so, okay, we got Schroeder. they also got Bruno Fernando, for example, right? They kept him because they basically only waived, I think, in a scanner. And so it was mostly, to me, the vibe I got from it was, we got this guy. This is a good player. I think he can bring something to the team. He can fill a role that we just lost with DJ Augustine. So let's see. Let's give him a shot. If he's okay with staying, let's give him a shot and see how it goes. The other thing I would touch on is I actually don't think there's a hole at point guard in this roster. And this is a little bit of a hot take, and not a lot of people agree with me on this, but if I had the chance, or before I make that point, let me go into Daisha Nix so you don't think that I'm just irrationally high on on Nix or something. Daisha Nix at this point does not warrant playing time. It is appalling how much he doesn't hustle. How many times we see a loose ball and he's not diving for it. He's just, he's just leaning over with his hands trying to reach at it. How many times do we see a rebound? And Gordon as well is to fault for this. A rebound just go past him and he doesn't even make an effort to go get it. I had a possession last night where they have their secondary units. They have one where Jalen plays a little bit with Nix, and they have one where Gordon plays a little bit with Nix. And it was the Jalen and Nix one, and he grabbed the rebound at the free throw line, and he passed it off, and Jalen was taking it in transition, and he was getting into a pick and roll, and I took a screenshot because 16 seconds on the shot clock or 14, I'm not completely sure. With that time on the shot clock, Daisha Nix had not crossed half court after grabbing the rebound. This is the bare minimum. Listen, you might not be able to hustle. You might not push the ball in transition. KPJ doesn't do it a lot either. KPJ is very nonchalant in the way he brings the ball up, which is something that I would guess Silas doesn't like a lot because he wants them to run. But at the very, very, very least, be in catch and shoot position, so you have to be guarded because your one attribute that's been passable so far is your half decent 3-point shooter. It's kind of the James Harden behavior, and I don't mean this as a shot at James Harden because there were just like it was mostly justified that he played like this because he had a huge load to bear. You're behaving like James Harden, who carries your team for 40 minutes a night every possession, as a backup point guard that was halfway out of the league, that got a non-guaranteed deal. You're the backup in the worst team in the league, and there's no hustle. You can barely be bothered to run to half court. In my screenshot, Jalen is setting a pick for not setting a pick. He's running a pick and roll with Garuba, and you got a floor spacer in each corner, and Jalen is in the left wing. Garuba sets the screen, and you have Garuba's man, Jalen's man, and DeAndre Jordan camped in the paint because Daisha Nix isn't even at the 3-point line yet. With this is 10 seconds into a possession. There's no urgency. So now that we've established that I'm not a big fan of Daisha Nix, I still wouldn't want a backup point guard, a veteran one. Because the way I see it, I would like a point guard if it was a good enough one to start. Because at that point, I think you're impacting enough players that the fact that you're a vet doesn't really matter. You might be a piece to build with for the future, and you're making the game easier for everybody else. If you're a backup point guard, you're playing 15 minutes a night.
Yeah, the time is so low. And by the way, maybe this is where Jayshawn Tate, who can be a decent ball handler and passer, maybe this is where you can steal some minutes for him as well, because I know that's a concern. When Tate comes back, whose minutes does he take? Maybe that's an answer.
Absolutely. And the answer is very much goes through that. If I'm Rafael Stone and I'm looking at this roster, I've got KPJ, who I believe is a point guard so far, and I have two other guys that are point guards that are prospects that I'm trying to develop. Daisha Nix, which is the one they rated higher for some reason, and then Ty Washington. Getting a fourth point guard, even if you don't think Ty will be able to play this year, to me, it would be overkill, kind of like the entire center situation. So to me, unless you're bringing in a starting level point guard and you're shifting KPJ to the bench as a 6-man role, which I think he would thrive in. I think KPJ is one of the guys that gets the shortest end of the stick in the Salah system because he's expected to do so much for this offense that I think he'll really shine when he's not doing it, because he's, I'll get into that later. I'll get into KPJ later. But to me, when Silas had already figured this out. It was one of the things that I would give him credit for earlier in the season. Hey, when KPJ's not on the floor, your backup point guard must be Jalen Green. They were staggering them. And if not Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün. It was my one motivation to be accepting of Şengün off the bench is, okay, at least we have one of the three of them on the floor at all times. And so you don't really need a point guard. Like, any guard can bring the ball up and make an entry pass to Şengün if that's the case. If there's Jalen himself can bring the ball up, he's rated as a better pick and roll ball handler this season than KPJ is. And so, to me, the key is, hey, okay, give these reps that you'd give to your backup point guard to one of these other two guys. Because bringing the backup point guard would help, but it would be such a low sample that just give the minutes to someone else. I think you're not getting enough value out of it. And besides that, I don't think you're going to be able to bring in a guy at this point in the season that may be a building block for the future, even if he's a vet, or that would be good enough to play starter minutes. People bring up Campazzo, and I don't know. Campazzo is the biggest one because he just got waived. No, Campazzo is not going to do anything or bring any development that Jalen Green ball handling with the second unit can bring.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I guess regardless of whether you address the backup point guard position or not, the one point that I think you're accurate on is that a guy who's averaging 15 minutes per game is not going to radically transform the rest of the roster. Now, the pushback, as I mentioned earlier, some of the guys they had last year were more scalable. In a given game, you could get them to 20 or 25 if it just wasn't KPJ's night. It was a rough matchup. But at the end of the day, all that's really doing maybe is helping you steal a win or two that might hurt your odds at getting Victor or Scoot in the 2023 NBA draft. It's not as if those minutes, unless those minutes are consistent, they're not going to radically transform the look of this team and the overall development of the prospects and some of the things that we talked about, on court accountability, those factors that we were going into earlier. So from that standpoint, I see where you're coming from, and perhaps it makes sense to focus more on the established guys, KPJ and Jalen, and what their strengths are. Jalen in year 2, KPJ in year 4, this being year 2 of them together as the starting backcourt, rather than who's behind them and how you're filling those bit minutes in the backcourt. And I guess when I'm looking at KPJ and Jalen, and we've talked about these guys a lot throughout the year, and, by and large, still pretty good for both of those guys for the season. One thing that's odd for me, when you look at Jalen, there's a staggering split between when he's at home and when he's on the road. And I think back to Matt's tweet where he says Green has a ton of possessions where he just gives up on what they're supposed to be running, just elects to fire. When his shot quality is good, he's tremendous. Obviously, that's implying his shot quality is not always very good, which is true. When Jalen's at home, he's averaging over 24 points a game, nearly 5 assists on 51% shooting, 41% on threes. Away from home, he's averaging below 20 points per game, 3.5 assists on 37% shooting, and 31% on threes. That's a pretty big split. And in fairness, the teams they played on the road has been pretty tough. They had that nightmare road trip earlier where they were in Phoenix, Utah, the Clippers, Portland. This road trip has not been friendly. The 2 in Denver, and then this weekend's going to be tough. Suns and Warriors. So maybe, the schedule plays into it, and it's not all just, the friendly confines of Toyota Center. We don't need to simplify this into, Road Rhino or the reverse of Road Rhino, referring back to Ryan Anderson when he shot so much better on the road than at home. With Jalen, it's the reverse. But it does feel like to me that Jalen, for whatever reason, he goes into trucker mode a bit more on the road, where things, when there's a bit of adversity, he starts doing things outside of the flow of the offense, whereas at home, things seem to come a bit more naturally for whatever reason. With KPJ, his numbers are actually pretty similar, home road. You don't see those splits, and he actually was, albeit a forgettable game, they lost by 20. KPJ played fairly well in that Wednesday loss at Denver. Why do you think Jalen has those types of splits? Why do you think KPJ doesn't? He is, more advanced in his career. He's year 4, whereas Jalen's year 2. And just what do you think overall of their levels of play these past couple of weeks?
Yeah, so to the home versus road point, I'm looking at it real quick because I think it's tough to say with a sample size this small, especially when the team is
Right.
this bad, and the fact that he had that slump.
Yeah, this
But it is
this
true.
is the caveat of small sample. Yeah, that
Yeah,
we're putting.
but it is true that he picked it back up when he was when he was at home. We kind of interpreted it as, hey, the shooting slump's finally over. Let's see what Leon has. And then the last couple of games, he's gone back down. I think it's interesting that in this new road trip, in these 2 games against Denver, and I think it's been a consistent thing that he's gotten better at. It feels like he's been consistently able to get to the rim, and his 2-point percentage is looking better compared to earlier in the season where his 3-point percentage was higher than his 2-point percentage. Which to me brings up, would it be about shooting in a different arena? Because his 3-point percentage is god awful. And so last game he was 1 for 7, I believe. The game before that he was, let me just double check so I don't throw a number out there that's not correct. The game before that he was 1 for 7 again. And so is it a depth perception or kind of thing? It might be, it might not be. It might be just that the team is clunkier on the road, and when the team is clunky, both him and KPJ are tasked with just throwing up prayers because they do that a lot. Maybe that's the case, maybe it isn't. But to touch on them kind of in a quarter mark of the season standpoint, I think people look at KPJ. I think it's 19, 6 and 6, and they think, oh, this is having a decent season. He's not. I love KPJ, and I think a lot of it is to blame on Silas, and I think a smaller role would benefit him tremendously. But he's not having a good season. I can pull up the stats real quick.
He's shooting like the lowest from, I believe, his 2-point percentage. He talked about working on finishing during the offseason. That has not taken the leap forward that he wanted. And I think his true shooting percentage is close to the lowest of his career. So I see where you're coming from. Again, like I've said before, I'm not that down on KPJ because I think there's a way you can use him much better in which you could play up his clear skills. We talk about the catch and shoot. But yeah, you're right. His overall production in the role that they're giving him is not that good.
And it's one of those cases where when people talk about empty stats, to me, the only value in the expression empty stats on a bad team or putting up stats on a bad team is when you're putting up volume on terrible efficiency. And in all categories, KPJ is putting up volume on terrible efficiency. 3-point percentage is up to 36%, so that's acceptable. But considering how good he is at catch and shoot, imagine like how bad it has to be pull-ups, which is the biggest part of the way he's being used. Free throw percentage, just looking at true shooting percentage, which is like the global one that most people use, it's down. And it's down for him, and it's down for league average. It's always been below league average. It hasn't gotten better. It needs to. He leads the league in turnovers total and turnovers per game. So when people bring up that he's, I think, 18th in the league in total assists, well, he leads the league in turnovers, and this is not a volume. This is not. I'll bring it out. This is not soccer where if you out of 10 chances get 1 goal and that goal wins you the match, that's okay. No, these are repeatable things, right? Getting 6 assists and 4 turnovers is not good. You can use the possession a different way, and you repeat possessions a lot of the time. So he's not having a good offensively, not a good season. I think it's noting that he has a floater that's new, that he's going to a lot. That's a good tool to have. He's going to it way too often. He's way too athletic to not be getting to the rim and getting fouled. Even though his free throw percentage has improved by 9% since last season, so take advantage of that. Shot profile has not been good. And then defensively, he's been awful. It's up and down. There's games where it's better, but just decision making has been awful. Going over screens on guys should be going under, overhelping, just not closing out on shooters. It's not been good. He'll have games where he gets heavy or big steal and block numbers. But once again, it's a little bit empty because you're not playing consistently good defense. You're getting a few highlight plays. And I think that's been the theme for KPJ so far this season. And I think it ties into the role that he's playing. He is not good enough to be Luka. He will be wildly overqualified as a sixth man. And it's important.
Or even as a small forward at times.
He has the size to do it. I suggest our listeners to go back and watch KPJ when he came from the Cavs after not playing basketball for a while because he had his troubles in Cleveland. Go back and watch those games with a team that was very, very under-talented for this league. KPJ and Justin Patton, who's nowhere near the league now, was a deadly pick-and-roll combo. What happened to that? When Silas had no system in place, KPJ was looking great. Why does now KPJ not look good for 2 seasons in a row as a point guard? We also it wasn't shocking that they tried to make KPJ the point guard. Someone was asking me this the other day. It wasn't. It felt like a natural development for a team that just drafted a shooting guard to slot him to the point guard because he showed plenty of playmaking flashes. He had a 14 assist game the first year he was with us. I don't remember the last time he touched that. It was instinctive to him. What happened to that? I highly doubt that KPJ forgot how to play make. He's just not being put in positions where his playmaking works.
This is the square peg and round hole analogy you go back to.
Yeah, exactly. It's impossible for a guy to get that much worse as time goes on, especially because he was completely out of practice. He was going strictly off of instinct. And if your instincts are as good as he showed, those don't go away. It's bad coaching. And then going from that to Jalen Green, just in general, he was an absolute hit. He's not been that great efficiency-wise. He's at 55% true shooting, and then we've seen how many slumps he's had shooting from 3. But what a prospect. He's been by far the best. Not by far because France has clawed back a little bit, but he has been the best prospect from his draft class.
Agreed.
And he looked like, and people were pegging him 5th, 6th in his rookie season. One thing that I would like to highlight with him is usually with uber athletic guys, they're not good shooters. Jalen is not only a good shooter, that's a strength of his, and that's so rare. His shot profile is unprecedented with one exception, Anthony Edwards, another young uber athletic shooting guard. He is taking 8-9 threes a game. That's crazy volume, but it's not like sometimes he's chucking them, but it's not that he's taking the normal amount of 2s for a guy with his skill set. No, it's that a higher percentage of his shots are 3s. And that's really important. That's the future of a shooting guard. And when you combine the fact that you're a threat from 2 as much as he is on that volume with his athleticism, I'm so excited to watch his career unfold.
Yeah,
I think he's made massive leaps as a playmaker this season. The streak ended last game, but he was having a streak of 6+ assists a game. I think it was 8 games long.
Right.
He's a better pick and roll passer or pick and roll ball handler right now than KPJ is. He has chemistry with Sengun. We can see him grow before our eyes. He is still one of the only guys on this team that no matter the score will fight through every screen. Our defensive scheme is awful. We overhelp a lot and we give up way too many wide open shots. But you see it with him. He is special. He has it when it comes to making timely buckets. We've seen it last year. We've seen it a little bit this year. Jalen has been everything and more than what I expected him to be. And I just want to take a second to highlight his shot profile and how red it is.
Yeah.
Because that's really special. And I don't know if that's something that Silas should be credited with or if that's something that's just his game. But that's really exciting going forward because he is, and something that needs to really be highlighted, 20 years old. And you can name other really athletic guys that shoot a lot. Jalen Brown is one of them. Zach LaVine is one of them. Neither one of these guys started shooting 7+ threes a game until they were 24. They were just 20. And we sometimes lose sight of how young he is to how good he is, and how much left he has of being a sponge and constantly improving on his game. Yeah, those are my 2 points on. Funnily enough, very contrasting seasons for both of them.
For sure.
Reasons.
Even if some of the topical numbers don't look that different, yeah, I get it. Especially in the context of their careers and what they can reasonably do moving forward. Yeah, again, it's all about the context. It's all about what they can do a year or two from now and where that fits in. The other guy along with Jalen that I think gives you a clear reason to be happy, especially the last few games, Jabari Smith Jr., just 19 years old. We talk about Jalen at 20. Jabari's 19, one of the youngest guys in this draft class as well. One of the reasons that we've never really worried about Jabari, besides the obvious of he's a rookie and he's trying to stay within himself. Again, his profile did not necessarily lend itself to a ton of year one success anyway. But I think you look at a guy with his history as a shooter, it was always just a matter of time. And in the last 5 games, you're seeing that last 5, 16 points per game, 7.2 boards, shooting over 46% from the field and nearly 45% from 3. So finally, the shot is coming around. He's becoming more aggressive as a rebounder. I think a lot of that comes from putting the ankle issues behind him. He suffered that in the preseason, tweaked it again early in the year. I think since he took that Minnesota game off, had limited minutes against Paulo in Orlando. Ever since then, he's been more energetic as a rebounder. You can see he's getting more comfortable with every game, and now the shots are falling in line as well. So for me, he's having the typical, rookie season. He's learning as he goes along. I generally agree with Matt's point in that thread. He's a winning player. He's always where he needs to be. And really, this is just basically playing out what we said before, which is don't panic. Eventually, the shots are going to fall. And when the shots fall, it looks like this, right?
Yeah, Jabari's been way better recently. I think not only on the offensive end, I think on the defensive end as well. He still needs to bulk up a little bit defensively, even to guard basically any position that's not a guard. And he's not used much guarding guards. I wish we had a bigger sample size on that, because just last night he got bullied a little bit by Aaron Gordon, who's not your prototypical power player, but that's okay. I'm not concerned with that at all.
With his body type at 19, it happens.
Yeah. He's got a good frame. He just needs to put on a little bit more muscle. To me, and he's finally shown, and he's finally looked for a few games like Auburn Jabari. Pull up threes, just rising and shooting above people. We saw him snake a pick and roll into a mid-range shot, which to me is okay. If we can build a little bit on that, I might go back on my take that I don't think he's ever going to really be an offensive option. We see him, coming off of screens. We see him just be an insane shooter overall, and then contribute as well with hustle plays, getting on the boards offensively as well. He still struggles inside. But this is kind of more like the vision that you had for Jabari. And I've seen a lot of people mention, how does Jabari become a star? And I think actually it's a pretty unconventional path for him, because as I said, I'm not too confident in him being a go-to guy offensively, because even though he's a really good shooter, the footwork, the space creation is not really there. We have never had a guy in this league that can switch 1 through 5 and be a real sharpshooter, or at least in the time that I've played, at the volume that Jabari Smith will be able to do it. And that is a star. I'm fairly good. That's a guy that changes your team's approach defensively. The way to imagine it is, Bam Adebayo was an all-star. Bam Adebayo is not a great shot creator. He was an all-star mostly because of his defensive impact. He's one of the best switchable bigs in the league. He's better than a lot of wings out there, and he plays the 5. That allows you to do so much. I think he'll eventually improve to be a better off-ball defender as well. He's shown flashes here and there, especially in the last few games. But I think that's the way you get him to be a star. And that's incredibly, and now that we're off the, hey, Jabari, like people think that he's a bust and whatever, it's good to remember how valuable that type of player is,
Yeah.
because he doesn't get in the way of other offensive options. I mean,
Mhm.
he's adding value. People talk about floor raisers and ceiling raisers. Jabari is very much a ceiling raiser because he's not taking away from others, he's just adding on top.
Yep.
And on a team that you have Jalen Green already, we don't know. I think he's the one surefire going to be, here for a while. I'm not so sure about Shingun and KPJ. I think they have potential to do so. Um, but in your closing lineup, I think Jalen Green's the only guy who could lock into a closing lineup 3 years from now when we're trying to win.
Yeah.
Assuming they have good luck in this lottery, you're going to get another guy, another Jalen Green type, if you pick top 5. So having a guy like Jabari who's going to be able to play with those guys is really important, because when you start trying to mock up ways to build this team, the problem you run into a lot of the time is way too many shot creators. I made a post today. If we drafted Wemby, right, and I got left, and I said, maybe we go and sign a point guard in free agency, since you just call Wemby. That's the glaring hole. What I was struggling with was the fact that, well, there's no longer space for KPJ and Şengün in the starting lineup, for example. There's too many. We have a lot of shot creating prospects, which is good. Those are the high ceiling type of guys. But since we already have so many of those, I think Jabari being so plug and play, and being so adding, the same analogy I just made, just adding instead of increasing the ceiling instead of raising the floor, is really important. And I reiterate something that I've been saying since the beginning of the season. He is going to very much be someone who plays better the better the team is.
Yeah.
He was never going to look great on a bad team. He was supposed to look better than he did, but he was never going to look great on a bad team, because, as we just talked about, he's a guy that plays off of other guys. If the other guys can't play, well, what's he gonna do about it? So just really excited for him. Happy that he's finally finding that confidence, and taking those classic shooter shots, the pull-ups, the I'm just going to shoot over you, what are you going to do about it type of shots. And look forward to seeing him bulk up defensively, and become that guy that I believe he can be, that is a
Yeah.
lockdown defender, legitimately 1 through 5.
Yeah, some great points there, and I'll add on to a couple of them before we transition to our final topic, which is the rotation and potential tweaks in the games and weeks ahead. I think your point on Jabari being so compatible in a number of scenarios with your roster building moving forward, and we know the cap room they have next summer, that's really important. Guys like, especially Şengün, but certainly KPJ as well, they're a little pigeonholed into certain roles, so there's scenarios where they may not make sense for you, whereas Jabari, besides the star upside, besides that question, just the fact that he can be so valuable in so many different ways, it's just so easy to fit him into a blueprint, where other guys, sure, there's a lot of upside, but they only make sense in certain roster constructs, where Jabari is just so plug and play. He can fit in so many scenarios. I also think that, you mentioned the 2023 draft. One of the underrated things, we talk so much about Victor and Scoot, but really that 3, 4, 5 range, the Thompson twins, Nick Smith, Brandon Miller, it's a lot stronger, the meat of the lottery. Now, in fairness to 2022, Ben Mathurin has had a really good start for the Pacers, but just in terms of at least the scouting, even if you don't get top 2, if you are one of the worst teams, assuming you don't have some terrible lottery luck and fall to like 7 or 8, it does look like the middle of the lottery is a bit stronger as well, or I would say upper middle. So even if you don't get 1 or 2 and get the franchise changer of Victor or Scoot, you're going to get a big time difference maker as well. I agree with you on the Jalen Green comparison, and so that's something to sort of keep in mind as well when it comes to trying to squeeze out lottery odds, and every position matters this season. And I'll leave off with this, because we've talked about the rotation a little bit. really in different segments throughout this episode. We talked about potentially phasing Daishen Nix out, especially when Jayshawn Tate comes back, not really needing to have a backup point guard. That's certainly an option. Some people would disagree since, it's not like KPJ's traditional point guard anyway, but again, there's multiple ways you can do it. And if KPJ is your starting point guard, then again, there's only so much you can do with that position anyway. So, that's a fair counter, even if some people will disagree. In terms of where we go down the stretch of the year, number one, it's pretty odd that the Rockets have right now a 10 or 11 man rotation anyway, and that's without even having Jayshawn Tate out there and with very inconsistent minutes for Josh Christopher. So again, that's something that I think in an ideal world would change and get guys into more constant roles that could help with their performance. The other thing that I think, and this is something that I think we'll probably agree on, starting KJ Martin over Eric Gordon would make so much sense. I think the meritocracy arguments you've made in the past, KJ clearly deserves that spot. He's also much younger at 21 years old instead of 33, will be 34 on Christmas. In the case of Eric Gordon, KJ's younger. He's more athletic. He's had a better season so far. He competes harder defensively despite Eric having the pedigree. Also, I think KJ's length and athleticism at the three could potentially help you a lot covering for some of Şengün's deficiencies on the defensive end. Having more length and athleticism alongside him, especially at those forward spots, I think that could help cover some of the things that they're worried about in terms of starting Alperen Şengün, which it seems like they're going to still do even now that Bruno Fernando is back. So for me, starting KJ over Gordon, I don't really think it would be a huge political thing because Eric has come off the bench previously in the NBA. You could, of course, December 15th is only 2 weeks away. That's the unofficial kickoff of trade season because most guys who sign contracts in the offseason become trade eligible on that day. So maybe you could move Eric Gordon off your roster as well. As we've discussed in the past, you're getting to a point where maybe there is an opportunity cost to keeping Eric Gordon simply because you have this roster crunch. I know there's been a couple of trade rumors with KJ. In my opinion, I think that's outdated intel from the summer. I think there was some uncertainty with regards to his role. There were some reports as to whether he wanted to be in Houston. From what I can tell, he's pretty happy here now. The role has been sorted out. I don't think the Rockets would trade him unless, he's not the type of prospect like Jalen where you'd say never, but I think the Rockets would have to be blown away by an offer. I think it's pretty clear that KJ is a part of the team unless there's something really compelling. And so to me, starting him over Eric Gordon just makes the most sense on a number of levels. I think he's earned it. I think the length and athleticism could help you. And I think it potentially provides a spark to a starting unit that's gotten a little bit stale as the Rockets progress through, again, the quarter point of the year, 5-16. So I suspect we're in alignment on KJ. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And then beyond that, what are some of the other things that you're wanting to see from the rotation as we enter the second quarter of the 2022 to 2023 season?
Yeah, to just a Paulo exclusive. To your point that KJ, I think it was a little bit misunderstood. I don't think the Rockets are trying to deal KJ. I think teams just want him.
Yep. Agreed.
And he liked the tweet and he quickly unliked it. I went and checked afterwards. And the tweet said, yeah, it was a reply to me where I was like, why are we thinking of trading KJ Martin? Like, he's easily one of the best players on the. I said that he might be the guy that impacts winning the most right now. That he's been here since the beginning. I think he's been mishandled year after year after year, but I won't get into that again. The tweet said he's not on the trading block because we put him there. He's on the trading block because other teams are trying to fleece the Rockets. And KJ liked it and just unliked it later. And I think
hashtag Paulo bomb.
Yeah, it doesn't mean a whole lot. It could have been accidental, but it kind of fits with what we've seen on the court. I think KJ deserves to start. I think I like to call him an extra possession generator of all sorts. Steals, blocks, diving for loose balls, outrunning guys to the ball. Rebounding is, like, for a 6'7" guy, he's a really, really good rebounder. He's a guy that's going to run in transition and push the ball in transition, which is something that we kind of lack in the first unit. Jalen does it, but then KPJ is slow at doing it, even though he's athletic. Şengün will push it, but he's not the most athletic guy. Jabari Smith doesn't have the best handle to bring it up the court. And Eric Gordon is very much just tuned out of trying too hard this season. And so KJ plugs those holes. KJ is also a really good role man. He provides you an extra option besides your center to generate drive and kick game. He's also a good passer when attacking closeouts and when in the short roll as well. It just makes a lot of sense. And if you go back to the numbers, on-offs, and just the lineup data, KPJ, Jalen Green, and KJ Martin are, I think, a either neutral or a -1, and KJ and KPJ, Jalen Green, and Eric Gordon are like a -13. So it's a huge difference to the playing style. And as we've touched on before, functionality is important because functionality keeps things like Şengün being more worried about scoring or Jabari just pulling up from whatever because he's not going to get the ball again. Functionality prevents those types of things. So that's point number one about the rotation. It's the one thing Rocket Surge has been talking about for the longest time. After that, we are currently running, as of last game, naturally, this is not because of garbage time. I'm already subtracting Josh Christopher, who only came in garbage time, an 11-man rotation, reliably since Bruno Fernando came back. That doesn't make any sense. Most NBA rotations are 8-9 players. 10 is usually a stretch. 11 is insane, especially when you're playing 3 guys at the center position. It feels like Silas really, really struggles with saying no. It's like he's like the nice parent. It's like, okay, he's coming back. I gotta find a way to fit him in. No, you don't. It's a non-guaranteed contract for a guy that was on a 2-way, right? You don't need to cater a little bit to Bruno Fernando and give him 7 minutes a game. Like, what does 7 minutes a game do for anyone? It's much better to play guys long stretches so we can get a decent look at them than just sprinkle minutes around to everybody. Garrison Matthews found his way back into the rotation after one good game. We don't make adjustments after one game ever. Otherwise, KJ Martin would be starting and the closing lineup decisions would be way different. Silas has said it himself. Hey, we make adjustments after 10 to 12 game periods when we look at the data. But what happened with Garrison Matthews? He had one good game and he was instantly a part of the rotation again. He has gotten more minutes than Tyrese, and I think 2 out of the last 3 games. So it's that kind of hypocrisy. So now we're making adjustments on the fly because it's Garrison Matthews, the 26-year-old sharpshooter that speaking of Garrison Matthews, he is terrible for everyone's development. He is, he'll make shots and he'll give you the adrenaline rush of when he makes a shot and he looks good. Oh, I just gave KPJ an extra assist that he really shouldn't have gotten because there wasn't a good pass and there wasn't a good shot to take. He'll do that, but that's a terrible habit. Dumping the ball to KJ Martin for a terrible shot coming off a screen just because it goes in sometimes is not a good habit to develop because on a winning team, Garrison Matthews is not playing. Way too much of a liability defensively, and most teams don't have guys that will take the shots that Garrison Matthews takes. So you're not developing anything there. Those are possessions that are thrown away. And Garrison Matthews plays a brand of basketball that is efficient on the worst, that is not efficient, that works on the worst team in the league, but is not scalable to anything. And even Seth Curry doesn't take the shots that Garrison Matthews takes. Seth Curry is like the best role player shooter in the entire league. He's not good for development. I'm sorry. I like Gary Bird. I love that he was in the gym all summer. He's a cool meme to have around the team for the fan base, but he's not good for development, especially if he's taking minutes away from Tari Eason, which is what's been happening. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing that's just mind-boggling. And I'll stay at that with rotation issues. I'll end off with saying, well, what's going to happen when Jayshawn Tate comes back? Are you going to run a 12-man rotation? And the other thing, well, what happened to Josh Christopher? I think it was reported that he lost his role because they didn't really like, the type of basketball that he was playing. They wanted him to play more offline to be less focused on scoring. Okay, if you're punishing him for that, I respect it. That, we want accountability. You are enforcing accountability with him. Perfect. It's been a quarter of the season. When does he get a shot again? Because the guys who are playing over him are not playing a good brand of basketball either. Josh is frustrating to watch, but at the very least, he'll try hard. if your motto for the season is will be hard to play against, Josh Christopher is a hell of a lot harder to play against than Dylan Nix is in any context ever. So it's like, okay, we're reaching a point where Josh Christopher is starting to deserve a shot, other than garbage time minutes, because those don't really count.
Yeah. And I think it's especially true now that you're 5-16, you're heading down this same clear path. Not that it's shocking. Again, everybody knew this was a rebuilding season going in about development. But again, there's no magic happening. It's not like playing these more veteran types is really bringing you benefits in other ways, be it wins or simply just making the offense or defense look more functional. So if you're not getting the results anyway, then yeah, you may as well play the younger guys with more options. I agree, and more just upside. If you're not getting the results, then at least play the guys who theoretically have more potential, and that's not Garrison Matthews or Dacian Nix. So which will about Josh Christopher, but at least he's someone that this time a year ago he found his way into the rotation. He was a big spark in that 7-game win streak. Maybe that's the case at some point in December again. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, with that, we'll finally bring this episode to a close. We went a little bit long, but that's because we hadn't recorded in 2 weeks. Thanksgiving was last week, which I know Paulo does not have Thanksgiving in Portugal, but of course a lot of our audience does. I did, and of course that was the start of the World Cup as well. Now with the U.S. having a few days off between the group stage and knockout, Portugal will play Friday, but they've clinched their group stage spot regardless. Still have first place to play for, which is not irrelevant, but with a 6-3 lead, they're in a pretty good spot. So I know you don't want to assume anything's done, but it looks pretty good. So this was a point for us to, go a little bit long, make up for lost time, and I think we covered some good ground. Paulo, thank you so much for the time. Any last words for our audience?
Yeah, I've shifted my approach in my World Cup viewing mode. It worked with the Astros, just talk about shit on Twitter, and the Astros won. So I'm shifting my persona on. I'm usually very scared in soccer, so I'm shifting my persona. And besides that, hey, if you're still watching Rockets basketball at this point, you're a diehard, and I respect the hell out of you for staying and watching, because if you have a podcast, it's like you kind of have a little bit of extra motivation. If you're just a casual and you still watch every game, that you're a real fan, and I really appreciate the people that still do that, regardless of how hopeless it sometimes looks.
Agree. Yeah, and there's still a long way to go, by the way. So as brutal as this is, yeah, we've got to find ways to get through it because, God, there's still 60 games to go. That's the crazy thing. We're at the quarter point. Well, yeah, that means 75% is still left. And especially coming off the Astros season, a lot of these are tough to watch. But again, you keep the right perspective. And I don't want to say that it can't get worse, but I think the odds are good that if it doesn't get better, at least it's not going to get appreciably worse. And there's ways, especially with Jalen year 2, Jabari year 1, that things do look a lot better as we move through the season. So knock on wood, definitely don't think it's going to get worse, and maybe we get lucky and it gets better. Anyway, this show is definitely for the diehards. Again, that's why we do this. And I think especially with the team in the state that it is in, then yeah, we're skewing towards the diehards, especially right now. So hopefully we provide value enough for you to stick with us for over an hour. With that, we'll finally bring it to a close. Again, for Paulo, I'm Ben. If you want to follow Paulo on Twitter, do so at PauloAlvesNBA. If you want to follow me on Twitter, do so at Ben Dubose. And you can follow this show, The Logger Line, on Twitter at The Logger Line. Also want to thank, as always, our sponsors over at Karbach Brewing, where the show is served to you by Clutch City Lager, their beer in collaboration with the Houston Rockets. You can follow them on Twitter as well at Karbach Brewing. You can also follow Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of the Rockets. They're involved in the support of this program as well. With those plugs out of the way, we'll finally wrap up. For Paulo, I'm Ben. Thanks for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode of The Logger Line.